Welcome to Daily Scripture Reading. I do not own the rights to this music. 1 Samuel chapter 4, the King James Version. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle, and pitched beside Ebenezer. And the Philistines pitched in Aphek. And the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel. And when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. And when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, Wherefore hath the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, that when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, which dwelleth between the cherubims. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, What meaneth the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews? And they understood that the ark of the Lord was come into the camp. And the Philistines were afraid, for they said, God is come into the camp. And they said, Woe unto us, for there hath not been such a thing heretofore. Woe unto us! Who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten, and they fled every man into his tent. And there was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen. And the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. And there ran a man of Benjamin out of the army, and came to Shiloh the same day, with his clothes rent, and with earth upon his head. And when he came, lo, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. And when Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, What meaneth the noise of this tumult? And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim, that he could not see. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army. And he said, What is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there have been also a great slaughter among the people. And thy two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck brake, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. And his daughter-in-law, Phinehas his wife, was with child, near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark of God was taken, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and travailed, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the women that stood by her said unto her, Fear not, for thou hast borne a son. But she answered not, neither did she regard it. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, the glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, the glory is departed from Israel, the ark of God is taken. The Amplified Version of 1 Samuel chapter 4. Philistines take the ark in victory. And the word of the Lord through Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines in battle, and they camped beside Ebenezer, while the Philistines camped at Aphek. The Philistines assembled in battle formation to meet Israel, and when the battle was over, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield. When the soldiers came into the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, so that he may come among us and save us from the hand of our enemies. So the people sent word to Shiloh, and from there they carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who sits above the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were with the ark of the covenant of God. So it happened that as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all the people of Israel shouted with a great shout, and the earth resounded. When the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, what does the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean? Then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp. The Philistines were afraid, for they said, God has come into the camp. And they said, woe, disaster is coming to us. For nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who will rescue us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, so that you do not become servants to the Hebrews, as they have been servants to you. Act like men and fight. So the Philistines fought. Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. It was a very great defeat, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. Also, the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were killed. Now a man from the tribe of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh that same day with his clothes torn and dust on his head, as signs of mourning over the disaster. When he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road, keeping watch, because his heart was anxious about the ark of God. When the man arrived to report the news in the city, everyone in the city cried out to God for help. When Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he asked, what is the noise of this uproar? And the man came hurriedly and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old. His eyes were dim, so that he could not see. The man said to Eli, I have come from the battle line. Indeed, I escaped from the battle line today. Eli said, how did things go, my son? The messenger replied, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great slaughter among the people. Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been taken. When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell off the seat backwards by the side of the city gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was old and heavy. He had judged Israel for 40 years. Now his daughter-in-law Phinehas' wife, was pregnant and was about to give birth. So when she heard the news that the ark of God had been taken and that her father-in-law and her husband had died, she kneeled down and gave birth, because her labor pains began. And about the time of her death, following the sudden birth, the woman attending her said to her, "Do not be afraid, for you have given birth to a son." But she did not answer or pay any attention. And she named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has left Israel," because the ark of God had been taken, and because of the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. She said, "The glory has left Israel, for the ark of God has been taken." The end. God bless you, and thank you for joining me today.